Hi guys and girls, Emma again. Welcome back to the spare room. Welcome back to this little engine build on Patreon. There's some bits. There's quite a lot of bits here. And there's some bits we need to make to finish this engine. Looking at this picture on the front, we need to make the piston and con rod. We need to make the pulley on the other side. We need to make the stud and the nut that hold the cylinder on, and that'll get us starting to look something like it's going to be a good job and starting to look like it's going to run. So first job really, I guess, is probably out of all these little bits is to make a knob. A little knurled knob. I might do that tonight. This is it here. It's tapped M3 and it's very simple. It's 10mm, 7mm long, and it's got a knurl on it, and it's got a recess on the end just to make it look nice. So it's a pretty simple little job. Won't take long to make that up. It's a good project for tonight. We'll go over the lathe and we'll have a look at doing it. So find a bit of an offcut, and I think there's enough length in this to do it. You want to leave enough sticking out to make your part. There's plenty there. And to part it off. And that's just a little offcut of hex brass. It doesn't matter much what it is. It's got to clean up to about 10mm. And it's got to be long enough to get the part out and still hold it in the chuck. We'll put a bit of a fillet or radius in that. And find a round file. And put a nice radius on the end there. That's got to be a bigger diameter than the spring, but that's pretty straightforward. We've done that. Next job really is to drill it 2.6. And I think while we're at it, we'll start to part it off. And we'll carefully tap at M3. Don't want to go too deep. Once we've got the thread started, it's a pretty easy job in brass to tap it all the way through. It's also a very easy job to break this tap off, so we don't want to do that. I think we're right through, or right down to the end of the hole. The next job is a knurl. There's a couple of ways you could have done this. You could have used a bit of 3/8 hex and just left it hex. That's probably nice. If you've got a knurling tool, you could just knurl it. In the past, I've been inclined to set up a tool on an angle and just slot this, and it doesn't take long to do it, and it gives you a nice straight knurl. And that'll work. I didn't have the camera on. Basically, in brass, this is a very simple job. set your knurling tool up on centre, and a bit of oil, nice steady slow speed, feed it in until you can see the knurl and feed it out again, job's done. You don't have to move it along, you don't have to do anything. We can part this nut off. And we've got a little pip on the end of it. Probably the easiest way to do that, or to fix it, is to just put a piece of threaded rod, the piece that you've threaded for either the put in the lathe, and screw it on. We'll find a cap screw and screw into it. Hold that in the lathe and face it off nicely. You could file it up, but it does look a little bit rough. You find that most of this pip will come off just with the side cutters. And if you run a tap all the way through that again, there's not going to be a whole lot left. And then it's a pretty easy job just to deburr it with a centre drill. And that's that nut made. Another part that really needs to be done is the con rod, or the big end. It says that's a bit of 1/4 inch square brass, and if you've got a bit of 1/4 inch square brass, use it for sure. It's only, well, it's 12 millimeters long. I haven't, but I've got this block of brass here that's scrap. We can easily make it out of something like that. All we need to do is change over to the 4-jaw chuck. Wind these jaws right in. And all we need to do is face this down to its 1/4 inch. Turn it around and face the other end, and we've got a piece of 1/4, and face the ends. We've got piece of brass the right size, and face one end for a start, and then we might set him up and tap the back end and face that off later. And in the end, that's what we've got. A bit of 1/4 by 1/4 brass. So the next job is to mark that back 3 millimeters there, and right in the centre, and drill him to match the crank, drill him and ream him to match the crank pin, and file the end nice and round. All fairly straightforward little jobs. You mark this nicely with a radius gauge, or you could use the tool that we ground up for the acorn nuts, or the dome nuts for the end of the axles, as a radius gauge. Draw around that. Or you could just do it by eye to match the hole, which is probably what I'm going to do. So let's mark this out, drill him, machine it round, and then we want to face it off, put in the 4-jaw and face it down to the right length, which is 12 millimeters, and drill and tap that hole too, and that'll be another piece finished. So this hole needs to be pretty critical actually. It needs to be nice and square. This way and this way. Best way is set it up in a vise, and then you don't have to worry about holding it. Just set it up a bit over flush and snug that up a little bit. A bit of a parallel or something like that, just to push a piece of stock, just to push that down flat so it's nice and smooth, and snug the vise up nice and tight then, and you're ready to go. I just mark this with the Jenny lead calipers. I set them at 3mm, marked the end, marked each side, and centre punch the centre of the holes there nicely with the centre punch. I'm going to spot this with a little centre drill and drill him out to 2.8 or to 3mm, I think, because the stock I'm using is 1/8. Run a reamer through it, and I'm going to do that in the drill press. At this point, you'll notice with this build we haven't really used the milling machine, and it is a project you could make quite comfortably without a milling machine if you've got a lathe. So I'm going to try and keep that theme all the way through, but we're just going to start and just start that with a nice sharp centre drill. Drill in 3mm, run the 1/8 reamer. I've got a machine reamer which looks like that with a straight shank. But first I need to check the drill press vise and make sure it's nice and square. A piece of round high speed steel or a drill blank, something like that, a piece of tool steel, silver steel we call it here, in the chuck, and a square on the table and a sheet of white paper. Just make sure that it's right both ways. I'm pretty confident in my vise, but I'm going to check it again anyway, and then I'm going to drill and ream that. And there we are, that's what we've got. We've got a hole in there nice and square. I'm pretty pleased about that. I'm confident that that's going to be okay. We'll slip him out of the vise. And you notice it's just fractionally off centre. So our starting drill has wandered there a little bit. What I'm probably going to do is clean that up round there. Take this off just with a file, or you could set it up in the mill if you want to, or in the shaper, or back in the 4-jaw, and just take a fraction off until that hole's balanced there. That's not going to worry anything. So when it comes to putting these two bits together, and we've threaded this 2.5mm on this end and 10mm on the other end, when we screw this in home, what you're going to find is that it doesn't quite seat as nice as you wished it had. If you've done all this in a milling machine and you've taken a lot of care with it, yes, it will. But you're going to find that you can get a piece of paper down there. You can't get it down all the way around, but one side's going to be different. And whether it's this way or whether it's this way, one side's going to be different, because no matter how accurate you get that, it's not going to be quite right. So the thing to do is screw that home nice and tight. Or snug anyway. And try it again. Right, this isn't really too bad, but it has got a gap under here. It's not bad under here. We can't get that piece of paper under that end, but we can get it under this end. It's not going to take much to adjust it. just with fingers, just carefully. And now we can't get a piece of paper under that side. And we can sort of get a bit of paper under there, but that's not bad. And that rubs nicely on both ends, so pretty happy with that. It's only going to need to be bent or distorted maybe on the end here, 10th hour, something like that, to give you enough that this actually touches. So just hand fitting. No need to scrap the parts. You're going to have to. And that little knurled nut screws on there like that. And there's a spring in between. You better hope you've got 2 springs because we've lost one. This doesn't need a lot of pressure on it. And that's a pretty good assembly there. Really happy with that. Next job here is to chuck this and face the end of it off and tap it and drill it and make it screw on this here. It's got a little lock nut. It's got a little lock nut, so just an M3 stainless steel or whatever nut you can find to go on there. You could make one, or you could find a stainless steel one that might be quite nice, or you could find a brass one that'll be alright, or even just a plated one. All it's got to do is stop that unscrewing. This is attached to the piston the same way as the crank is, just with a little bit of a taper. So we need to set this up in the four-jaw and drill it and tap it. We need to make a piston, we need to fit this up, and then we need to measure the length and thread this, cut it and thread it to fit. So that's the project tonight. Now, this doesn't have to be particularly accurate this way or this way. On the crank pin we've probably got 3 millimeters or 4 millimeters slide each way. This will work laterally. The other way, if it's offset, it's really not very critical. But it wants to look right, so just set it up to eye, and you can get it pretty close to eye with, you know, if you can't get it within 15th hour, which is less than half, or just under half a millimeter, there's something wrong. Run a cut round the outside before you face it all the way off, and just see, make sure that it's cut in the same amount on each flat. And if it's not, adjust it then and cut in a little bit further, and you'll be able to see and get it pretty close pretty quickly without worrying too much about it. You could cross-hark it and mark it carefully in the centre and set it up between centres. You're only getting the centre mark accurate, you're not actually getting that. You could put a DTI on this, there's not much sticking out. You could put a DTI on this and get all 4 sides right, and pull it back in between and get it sorted that way. That's probably quite nice. You can take the time to do that. This doesn't have to be good, you just got to be able to look like it's in the middle. So the most important part is that this part is parallel this way, and that's why we're doing it within the four-jaw like that. So when you've got it where you think it should be, we're just going to face it off. And length's not particularly critical. If you're within about a millimetre, that's going to be good enough. if you're making 3 of these things and they've got to line up beside each other in a competition and look like they're all the same, that's nice. Or if you're copying a prototype, then you would be a bit more careful with things like this. But we're only making 1 of them. So nice sharp spot drill or centre drill.